It sure seems like we have gotten the nod that if it wasn't clear before, it's clear now that Jimmy G will be starting week one and seems to have the leg up to start as long as he performs well. Would you say, in your observation, granted that it's not saying much, would you say that this was, in fact, Jimmy G's best offseason program?
I haven't seen him in the preseason before, so I can only base it off of what I saw this time. And he was, uh, I think there was a lot of similarities between what happened with Garoppolo and Lance, and I think that Garoppolo's the incumbent. He has the support in the locker room, and I think at the end of it, when you have to make a decision, you go with, they're going in that direction because he has proven to be able to win, and the locker room is behind him. At least the main leaders of the locker room are behind him. So that, I think, gives him a little bit of a nod over Lance, just from that perspective. And then when you look at what's happened on the field, neither one of them have really performed all that great with the starting units on the field. But Garoppolo did perform better in the games than Lance did when given those opportunities.
He did. When he comes into those pressers, what's your sense of Jimmy? Do you get a sense of true confidence coming through, or is there a bit underneath the surface?
He's an interesting guy because, it's not like, I don't think I'm sure that things are bothering him, but he doesn't let that show when he talks to the media. He keeps things as, very even keel. So he's never too high he's never too low. It's the same guy all the time, smiling, happy, kind of almost a gosh darn it kind of an attitude. I'm just happy to be here and working through things. That's pretty much what he says on an everyday basis when you talk to him.
Right. Yeah, it's sort of frustrating on the field. You see that same even keel even after some of the interceptions that just feel like they came out of left field. You want to see a bit more of that emotion, but it does seem to be true to who he is, and that's what comes through in those interviews when he steps to the mic. Is a fairly reasonably confident person. I don't get the sense that he is bulletproof. I don't get the sense that he is Tom Brady, where he steps to the mic and he doesn't care what you ask him. He doesn't care what you say. He doesn't care what you think because he's just that sure of himself. I get a little sense from Jimmy that he says the right things. He acts the right way. He does the right things as a teammate, but that underneath it all, he still needs to prove to himself that he really belongs in that room, that he belongs in that position. And I think that I'd like to see from him a little bit of growth in that area. It sure seems like that's an area where he could take a step forward in my mind.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think he's very similar to Eli Manning, right? That was one of the things knocks on Eli Manning all those years was he didn't show emotion. Didn't matter whether they were doing good or bad. It was always the same look on his face, right? And that's almost really what you see with Garoppolo when he's on the field or in his interviews.
I love the way that Eli was able to make fun of himself for that. Like some of the Saturday Night Live shit that he did with his brother was just unreal. I mean, funny as all get out. And just that ability to poke fun. I think Jimmy, he's starting to understand that he can let himself come out a bit, but I think that he could do himself a favor by allowing that personality to come through a bit, being a little bit less robotic, a little bit less controlled, a little bit less concerned about what other people think of what he says. Because at this point, he's got to realize that it's all about his play. I mean, at this point, it's all on him whether he can continue to start or not, because the writing is on the wall as to what direction the 49ers are going to go at some point. It's just a question of when.
Yeah. No, and I think if he goes out there and he performs to the best of his ability and he stays healthy, he's going to be he'll be the starter all year long if he plays to the best that he can. If he struggles and has some really bad weeks back to back, that's when you might see some things change. But that's the direction that I think they're looking towards now.
Yeah. I made that prediction early in the preseason before seeing Trey, admittedly, that Jimmy would start. I believe I said 16 games. He'd miss one to injury. Having seen Trey play, I have to walk that back a little in that I think it's entirely possible Jimmy will struggle at some point and Trey will have shined to some degree, and it'll be near impossible not to put him on the field. But I agree with you in the fact that even now that I've seen Trey, I still think it's going to be the majority Jimmy for 2021. That just feels like the direction it's going. And that brings me to the other question that I have is Were you surprised at all that he was named a team captain today?
No, not. I'm not surprised by that, especially considering I think the players are the ones that vote on that, and he seems to have a lot of people in the locker room on his side. So it's not really that much of a surprise to me. I think that even if you go back to I think 2012 when Alex Smith and Colin Kaepernick had their back and forth,
Right.
I think that Smith was a captain that season. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he was. So it's kind of a similar situation here, I think.
I believe he was. That was a painful transition as a fan for me to watch the Alex to Cap. Again, I always root for whoever is starting at quarterback for the 49ers, but I am a bit of a I appreciate loyalty. I appreciate friendships and things that matter like that. And it just feels that in this transition, I know it's a business, but certainly in that Alex scenario, it felt like a bit of a raw deal for him to get injured and lose it. Hopefully this year it will be less of an injury situation and more of a quality of play that dictates Trey starting. So what do you see Trey having to do? Is there anything that he could demonstrate that would make it crystal clear, you know what, week X, week 12, we're starting Trey? Is there anything that his play would dictate in that regard?
I don't think so. I think as long as Garoppolo is playing to the best of his ability, he's going to start.
Mm-hmm.
He's going. You don't. I don't think you start him because you're not going to go to Trey Lance unless you're guaranteed that you're figure he's going to start the rest of the year. You're not going to pull Garoppolo off the field and say we're going to run Trey out there this week, and then we'll go back to Jimmy next week. That's not the if things don't go well, that's not the way that this could work. It's got to be, at least I don't think so. I think it's got to be Garoppolo until you're ready to put Lance in there and keep him in there the rest of the way.
That makes sense. I tend to think that you're right there, that it's more on Garoppolo. Now, do you see it as a question of just winning, or does Jimmy need to be playing well? So if we put ourselves in a hypothetical situation where the 49ers are still winning, which seems entirely possible with the phenomenal defense and stellar run game, but Jimmy's playing poorly, do you see that as an opportunity to bring Lance in, or do you think that it has to be a couple of losses before we make the switch to the rookie?
If he's playing poorly, I think it's going to have to be an injury or multiple losses. Because that's kind of the deal. Going back to the Smith thing again, that's kind of what happened there, right? Was if Smith doesn't get knocked out of that game against the Rams and doesn't have to miss a game, he continues on as the starter, even though he struggled against the Giants a few weeks before that, right? And he'd struggled against the Giants in the championship game the year before, and so on. So I think it's going to take an injury or multiple weeks of him performing poorly for him to be replaced full time.